Welcome to Debut Writers, the podcast that takes you on an inspiring journey through the world of writing and publishing. We're your hosts. I'm Bree.
And I'm Anne, and we're thrilled to be your guides as we talk tips and strategies to help you become a successful writer and get your work out into the world.
Today, we are discussing goal setting with recommendations on setting attainable goals to get your book through the finish line.
So, Bree, as an author coach, what would you say are good long-term attainable goals? Like, I want to write a book. How long should that actually take me, start to finish?
Oh my. So I would say it is very dependent on the author specifically, but when it comes to their goal setting, they have a lot of self-awareness for what's realistic for them. And that's the biggest thing I think is figuring out what's realistic for you and then setting the timeline based on that. So when it comes to writing the book itself, we're not talking about the next steps with the publishing industry, but writing, I would say I have worked with authors that some have written their book in a month or even shorter, and then some that it's been 6 months and some that have actually even worked years on it. But could that have looked different had they had different goals? It really is depend. But that being said, setting those goals is so important to actually keep you on track so that it doesn't take years.
Exactly. It actually took me only a week to write A Lost Woman, but it had been a dream and a goal of mine for over 10 years to write the book. And I had started and stopped. Career got in the way, motherhood got in the way. And then I finally told myself I had a week off in the summer and I was going to finish this book. We've talked about that on the previous podcast about, finding your why and your goal and really getting that motivation behind writing your book. So I sat down and that was the only thing I did for a solid 6 days, like barely eat, barely sleep, just wrote the book. So, but that's what it took for me to get it done. But I would say I'm writing my next installment of my YA novel right now, which that did take me a couple of months because I didn't have the space to take an entire week off of my life to write a book. So
not many people do.
Right? So the goals that I've kind of attained from that is, let's say that I want to write my book in 6 months. So I'm going to set aside 3,000 words a week. I can write 1,000 words per hour. So then I'm going to devote 3 to 5 hours per week to writing. Where can I set that apart? And always also adding in those buffer times of, like, I thought I was going to write for an hour yesterday, but I missed it. Luckily, I've banked extra time on Friday to cover that time. So always give yourself some flex when you're setting those writing goals and those times, because you could miss one day for whatever reason. I've been battling a nasty sinus infection. So that's been my problem lately. I've fallen way behind on my goals.
Yeah, life happens. So having that buffer time is really important. And if setting words, specifically a word count, isn't best, then I would even say just to set time. So if you're going to say, okay, if I want to finish this book within the 6-month time period, I should maybe be setting an hour a day or 45 minutes a day. And I know one thing that's helped a lot of people is sometimes they break even that hour up. So they'll say, I'm going to write for 25 minutes and then I'm going to take a 5-minute break, like set an actual timer on your table so that, and don't even pay attention, set it, start writing for that 25-minute period. When that timer goes off, take that 5-minute break to either refill your coffee or step outside, whatever you need to, and then write for another 30 minutes. And then your hour is done and it will fly by. And there will be days that you write something and you think this is perfect. This is exactly what needed to come out. And there are other days where you're not going to have that, but you still moved your story forward.
Yeah. And if you've put together a really well-designed outline, that can help you too when you're kind of writing. If you're stuck or you're feeling like, where am I going next with this story? Go back to that outline or go back to your main points and just kind of remind yourself, okay, this is where I'm trying to get with this story. So what's something I can write now to get us one step closer to that? What's a scene that I need to have that can get us to that ending point. I think another important question when you're setting goals of, how quickly should I finish this book and what should I set aside in time to do it, is your word count means a lot. I mean, there's a big difference in writing a 40,000 word book versus a 100,000 word book. That's a huge amount of
Weird.
time. So you got to think, and you can Google this, like Googling, like, what's the average word count for your genre? Like if you're a nonfiction, you're going to go on the lower side. Mid-grade YA, again, you're on that lower side. Fiction, you're on the higher side. I recommend never, ever going over 100,000 words. It's going to be very difficult to get literary agents and publishers to even consider your book as a new author. I mean, J.K. Rowling can do it, but I mean, unless you're her, you really need to watch that word count. It just makes everything. It also shows that you have maybe not shown the skill of how to refine your work if it's over 100,000 words, or you're showing a lack of knowledge that your word count needs to be under that amount. A lot of agents, if they open it up and they see my debut novel and it's going to be over 100,000 words, they say nope. They don't even read the rest of it. They just say no. And so definitely keep that in mind too as you're setting your goals for writing your first book.
It's certainly not impossible. I know that we've both been in a room where someone was talking about that one-off situation where someone wrote over 100,000 words, but keep in mind that that's not the norm. So definitely, yeah, I mean, refine your story so that when you are going to pitch your book, you're not pitching 5 different stories to somebody when they just really want to know what the one story is. Okay, on the note of outlines, we kind of touched on it, but is it a necessity? I know we've talked about your writing style. So do you have to have an outline in order to meet your goals?
I don't think you have to have an outline. I think it is really helpful, though, to write down your book summary and your book pitch before you get started. I think I mentioned this on another episode. When I went to go start pitching my story to agents, I had a really hard time developing a good pitch. And when I finally wrote a pitch that I was really proud of, I realized, well, that's not really what happens in the book. I was like, I should go like add this like dun 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 fact to the book. Like my stakes just really weren't high enough. They weren't there to like be, exciting enough for a reader to keep reading my book. So that's what I kind of learned writing my book pitch. So sometimes it can be really helpful to write those things first and then to always kind of go back and remind yourself, especially the end, always know your end first. So write that down if you need to, and know that this is the goal, the end goal that I'm trying to get with my book. So like I said a minute ago, when you're struggling with writing or you're like, where does this book need to go next? Even if you're just free writing and you don't have a solid outline, then go back to that. Okay, what do I need to get closer, a step closer to that ending? And also remember that when that first draft is going to have a lot that you're not going to keep. When you go and do that first round of edit, Stephen King says you should take at least 20%, 25% out of that book. So you're going to delete a lot. And I don't ever encourage actual deletion. Remove it to a new document and say that here's my deleted stuff, because you may want to go back and grab it one day for another story, or if you continue a series. You never know. Never delete anything.
Absolutely. I think an outline can help you stay on track. We're talking about goal setting, and I think that an outline can help, but it's not a necessity. I know that there are plenty of writers out there that don't need one. And if that's you, then I think that that's okay. But at the same time, there's probably other goals that you want to set for yourself to make sure that you're staying on track. But if you are the person that checks lists, which that's me, I love a good list and I like to go down that list. Your outline can kind of function that way for you too, where you see, okay, what do I need to do next? How do I get this to the end, like Anne was saying?
Yeah. And I normally have the outline in my head. So it's not like I'm just like off the cuff the whole time. I definitely have the general idea in my mind. I just don't take the time to write it out because I'm a little impulsive and I just want to start writing because that's my favorite part. I always say writing is like a relationship. the beginning where you're developing the story and you're just getting into a relationship. Where is it going to go? How exciting is this? It's new. And you're just all about that relationship. You want to spend all your time with it, right? And then, and then that editing part is that kind of that lull of the relationship where you're like, I mean, you start picking out the bad things and you start kind of getting irritated with it. And you're like, do I really want to do this? It's a lot of work. I just don't know if I'm in this to win it. And then finding a publisher is like getting engaged. You're like, yes, the book really likes me. People really like me, and it's like, it's happening. It's going to happen. And so you get kind of excited about it again. And then once you publish the book, it's like being in a marriage. There's ups and downs of it, but there's a lot of love that comes back into that book. I absolutely adored, after my first book was published, getting asked to attend book clubs and speaking engagements and talk about the book and where did the book come from and what inspired me and what was true in the book, what was not true in the book. And so because I think every writer bases a lot of stuff on their true emotions, true events that have happened to them. So readers are always really excited to kind of pick that apart and see that part in your book. So that's why I really kind of fell in love with it after it got into the hands of other people and they started saying great things about it, pat myself on the back. But I always find that that's a really good analogy of the writing process.
It is. It's so good. I would say too, talking about how readers are just as interested in that information. As a new writer, I would also seek out that information as part of this, because hearing other authors talk about what inspired them or what they did, the goals that they set, will help you learn different processes and ultimately figure out what works for you, because every author sort of has a different process that they go through. And it's okay to listen and learn from those people and say, oh, I might try that. That didn't work. Oh, I listened to this. I really connect with that author and what inspired their story. Maybe I should try something like that. So I would say, if there are other interviews out there that you can listen to or read from authors that you have really liked their work and their books, then learn more about what they say about their processes and how they actually finished their book and brought it to the finish line.
Yeah. And give yourself permission to adjust and listen. If you're working on a process and it's not working, so with one of my books, I was required by the publisher to make a very strict outline to present to then get paid to write the book. Not much, by the way, so don't get excited. It wasn't like that. You're like, oh, wait, really? No, not that much. It was an online novella type of thing that I got approached to writing, and I'll try anything. I'm a big yes person. So I did it, and I had to make a very detailed outline, and it actually was incredibly helpful when I was writing the book. And I had somebody that was on me saying, like, this was due this week. Like, where is it? Like, we need to have it. And it also took the pressure off of it having to be perfect. So it was like, I would just, well, this is what I wrote. I don't really have time to do anything else. So here you go. It's all you get. So sometimes taking that pressure off of yourself too, to like make it perfect, just reach your goal, even if you're not sure where it's going. And then like right now with the novel I'm working on, I'm having a really hard time because I'm not liking the direction it's going. I think I want a different ending. So that's a huge shift in the book, right? And I have to be willing to kind of let go of maybe like 10,000 words. And that's a lot of words when you're trying to only meet a 60,000, word goal. To lose 10, you're just like, oh, that's painful. I feel like I've wasted time, but you haven't. Every time you write, every goal that you meet with writing your book, you're expanding and you're learning about this book as you write it too. So be flexible to move and shift with that book.
Absolutely. And you just made me think too about the author Allison Larkin, who I did get to speak to once about her writing process and talking about how that's not wasted time with those 10,000 words. I thought it was so funny when she said, and I'm going to not directly quote it, but the interview's out there if you want to listen to it. But she had said, when you figure out what works for you, whatever you had to do, or really whatever you had to spend, it's not wasted, even if it told you that that's not the process that works for you. So if your process is that you have to sticky note the entire thing, buying those sticky notes isn't wasted. If your process is that you have to have a cup of coffee, like fresh cup of coffee, or you need to run to Starbucks or Dunkin', then it's not wasted. But figure out what works for you, and none of that will be wasted. When you have to lose 10,000 words, it's not wasted at all as part of that process.
Something else that's new that we recently were introduced to at the Beyond Words Festival, book festival that we went to back in November, was the power of like premeditation. Sitting there and really clearing your mind, opening your mind up to the story, kind of going over the story fully in your mind, and then sitting down, taking those deep breaths, and then really submersing yourself into the writing of your story. I think this is kind of like new age writing stuff coming down the pipe of, that brain meditation of how to get yourself really like in the book writing vibe.
Yes, it makes me think about the whole meditation that we did back in November to, explore your characters and everything. So it is, that's the trend in writing. So,
Yeah.
okay, I think that it really starts though. Step one, when it comes to your goal setting, is set a realistic time frame for when you're going to finish this. Are you going to write this book in 3 months? Because what you need to do every day is going to look different versus if you're going to complete it in 6 months or even a year. And I think that's okay too. If you're working full time, just depending on what your schedule is like, but set whatever is realistic for you. So say, I'm going to finish my book in 3 months. I'm going to finish my book in 6 months. I'm going to finish my book in 12 months. Whatever works for you, set that goal and then work your way back with, what do I need to do next to hit that end goal?
Yes. And if you're one of those people that joins a gym and never goes, or says you're going to start running and you only do it a couple of times, basically, you're one of those people that you already know you need accountability. I am one of those people. I need accountability. Find somebody to hold you accountable. Go on to writing groups or writing circles, or find your local writing group and set goals for yourself and say, call your friend and say, I'm going to have the first chapter to you by the end of the week. I need you to hold me accountable to that. Sometimes just saying it out there to another person, it changes the mindset that you have in terms of, does that goal need to be met? Sometimes I'm feeling very frustrated on a day, and I'm just, when you're just not happy because you haven't done what you needed to get done, and it's overwhelming because you're like, I really wanted to get that first chapter written and I haven't gotten it done. And I feel like a failure right now. And my husband will go, well, who needed the first chapter today, babe? And I'm like, I needed it. Nobody else needed it. Like, that was just my inner goal. And he's like, so maybe give yourself some freedom to not meet that goal. That's a slippery slope though for me if I make excuses and I don't meet goals though. So I know that about myself. So, really, like Bree said, set that long-term goal of how long do you want to take to write this book, and then work yourself backwards and identify how many hours in a day do you think you really have to write a book? How many words can you write in an hour? Do and time yourself. Just sit down, time yourself for an hour and write, see how many words you write, and then say, okay, I know I can produce 500 words an hour. Or maybe you're producing 2,000 words an hour, and you're like, all right, well, I can, as long as I'm writing X amount of hours a week, I'm meeting this word goal a week. And so I'll have enough words by the end of 6 months. Is it going to be a well-developed, draft that I'm sending out to agents? Definitely not, but it will be done. And that's what Stephen King taught me, is it will be done. And then you can start the next process. And that's what's important.
Yes, we're going to repeat it because it needs to be said. Your first draft is not your final draft, but you do need to get it done. So, well, guess what? If you're a subscriber on Substack, we have a writing schedule template that you'll be able to download. So that should help you. And we're also going to be completing this series on before you start your book, everything that you need to know. We have 2 more episodes coming up. So make sure that you do subscribe so that you can get all of the detailed info, anything special that goes along with that. But what's happening in our next episode?
So in our next episodes, we're really going to dive into Do you have what it takes? We're going to be really diving into what types of ideas do you want to write about? Is your idea good? What, how should you put it together? And Bree and I are going to be giving in the moment and additional feedback to your book ideas. And then on the last episode, we're going to have the wonderful Deborah, who is an editor we've worked with, and she's been an editor for over 25 years, kind of help us figure out how to find that story. So she has a download for you, and it's the top 10 questions you should ask yourself about your story. And when you answer these questions, she guarantees you'll have your story ready to go. So that's really amazing too. So make sure that you subscribe and don't miss these next 2 episodes that are really going to dive into how to get your book story started. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Debut Writers. Make sure to check out our newsletter for your 3 T's and subscribe to never miss an empowering conversation.
Stay inspired and keep writing.